So what's going on, guys? DIY Dan here again, and this is another episode of Day to Day Around the House. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to repair some common leaks that happen on your hose bibs around your house. The main reason I took care of the leak on my hose bib is because I leave it on all weekend long because I added a sink to my back patio and another one over by the side door of my garage. So I have the ability to wash my hands without having to go inside. Now there are several different types of hose bibs and they all might use different types of seals. However, the concept for replacing these seals is going to be very similar to what I go over in this video, regardless of the specific brand or model of type of hose bib you might have. So the hose bibs on my house used an O-ring in order to seal the stem to the hose bib, which is what I'm going to focus on in this video. The other main style of seal that is used on a hose bib is more of a square cut O-ring, and I will do a quick overview of the differences of that as well in this video. So the only thing I needed to repair my leaks on my hose bibs was an O-ring, and I happen to have an O-ring kit around the house that I was able to match them up. You can also go on Amazon and get one of these universal kits that should have what you need, or just take those seals off, leave your water shut down for a little bit, go to your local Home Depot or Lowe's and get those seals that way. So let's get to it. All right, guys, so there's two main types of hose bibs. One uses more of a packing washer, and then you have one that uses an O-ring and a little extra nylon steel. So I'm going to explain how these work real quick because it's easier to fix something if you understand how it works. So our water pressure is coming in through the hose bib here, fills up this area here, and stops at the stem seal or stem washer. There's a little flat area that this rubber seal seals and keeps the water from coming out the hose bib. As you unthread the handle, it lifts that stem seal up, and that's what allows your water to come from this area over and come out the hose bib. So then this style, this is using a packing washer and a packing nut. The advantage to this type of hose bib using the packing washer is if it does start leaking when you open the handle and you have it in the on position right around this area here, if you take a crescent wrench or whatever and tighten this nut down a little bit, it will expand that square cut O-ring and it might seal that leak up. Whereas you don't have that option using the O-ring style of hose bib. So this is the O-ring style of hose bib. The concept for how it seals down here is going to be exactly the same. It uses the stem washer. Seat comes up, allows the water to go through. The only difference is how they're sealing the handle assembly as it comes out of the hose bib. This one on the nut has a nice flat surface, and it has an O-ring on the stem itself that seals against that. So over time, the seal gets worn and it just doesn't seal up against that edge anymore, and that's why you need to replace it. So the two main types of leaks that you'll have on a hose bib, depending on which seal goes bad, if in the off position you're dripping out of here, then your stem seal is bad. If you're in the on position and you're leaking around where the handle goes into the hose bib, then that O-ring or your packing washer is bad. However, the concept for disassembling these and replacing the seals is pretty much identical for both of them. The easiest way to tell whether you have a packing style hose bib or an O-ring style is the ones that are using the packing washer. You should be able to see threads below the nut where the handle is coming out of the hose bib. And with this style, if you do have a leak when you're in the open position, you would try and tighten down this nut a little bit to see if the leak stops before tearing it apart and replacing the seal. So here's the hose bibs that were on my house. You'll notice how the nut at the top where the handle is, you cannot see any threads below it, therefore telling me that it was a O-ring style hose bib and I didn't have that option of trying to tighten it down a little bit to seal it up. So the first thing you're going to want to do is shut the main water supply off to your house and then go ahead and open up one of your hose bibs to drain all the residual water pressure from the house. Once doing that, you can go ahead and use a Phillips screwdriver most likely to remove the handle from the hose bib. Once removing that screw, I went ahead and tried pulling that handle off, and since it's been on there for 10 years without being messed with, it did not want to come off. So then I went ahead and grabbed a wrench, tried tapping it up. Once again, it did not want to move. So then I loosened the handle up to the point where I could wedge the wrench between the top of the hose bib and the handle and use the wrench as a pry bar, and it popped right off. Then I grabbed a 5/8 wrench in order to remove the nut from the hose bib. you do want to hold on to the piping going into your house while doing that initial break free of that nut, so you don't possibly leverage on that piping inside the house. Also, in my case, I was worried about possibly cracking the stucco. You'll notice that the handle is still on the stem assembly when I removed it in this video clip. I could not get the handle off when it was off of the hose bib, so I ended up reinstalling it, then removing the handle and then taking it back off again. After removing the stem assembly from the hose bib, I did end up putting the handle back on so I could thread the stem out of the nut. Here is a good view of the O-ring that was causing the leak on my hose bib. Using a small pick, I removed that O-ring from the stem of the hose bib. Then I matched it up with a new O-ring of the same size and pushed it into place. Once again, you might need the pick to assist you in getting it over the lip where it belongs on the stem. A common problem when rolling an O-ring up into place like this is that it can get some twists in the O-ring, which can cause a premature failure or a possible leak. To remove those twists out of the O-ring, I held the O-ring in place and then twisted the stem a couple times. The other way you can do it is possibly get a small pick under the O-ring and just wrap it around a couple times, and that will remove those twists as well. A good check to do to make sure you have the proper size O-ring before putting it back together is you'll notice the recessed area on the stem for that O-ring. With the old O-ring, it was pretty much flat with the top of the edges. Once I put the new O-ring on, you can see that it has a nice rounded lip above those edges, and that's what's going to give you a good seal. Then using some light sandpaper, I cleaned up the inner part of the nut, giving the new O-ring a nice clean surface to seal against. When going back together, you want to use some type of lubricant on that O-ring to keep it from ripping or tearing as you install it. I use this Spa Lube. I've also got another one that's called Magic Lube that I got off of Amazon for like $9. I use it on all kinds of stuff. One of my favorite things to use it on is the garden hose threads. If I'm planning on putting a hose on there and not taking it off for a long time, because I've had those bind up to the point where I've ruined a hose or a splitter valve because I couldn't get them apart. So if you're leaking out of the actual hose bib itself where the garden hose attaches, when the hose bib is in the off position, then that's going to be your stem washer. And on this hose bib, all you need is a Phillips screwdriver to change that out. And then this hose bib also has a seal around the threads where the nut goes onto the hose bib itself, and you would just use a pick to remove and install that seal as well. So being as though the only place I had a leak was where the stem was going through the nut, I replaced that O-ring. Now I'm threading the stem back into that nut a little bit. You can also put the handle back on and use the handle to thread the stem back into the nut as well. Then I put the screw in and tightened it down. Then went ahead and placed that stem assembly back onto the hose bib and used the wrench to tighten it down. When tightening it down with the wrench, I do recommend holding onto the piping going into the wall so you don't leverage on it in any way, shape, or form and possibly create another problem. You do want to be careful not to over tighten this nut because you are dealing with brass threads and you don't want to strip them out. And that's all there is to it, guys. After that, I went ahead and turned my main water supply back onto the house so I could verify my repair. Then turned on the hose bib, and as you can see, that little bit of water flow is from the stupid backflow preventer, but I no longer have water coming out when I have the hose bib turned on coming from the stem past that nut. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and it gave you some good information. If so, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. The whole concept of my channel is to give you guys the most information in the least amount of time as possible so I don't waste your time. And I hope to see you next time. Have a good one. Later.